JB here. JB, hope everyone's doing outstanding. Tuesday, April 1st, 8:57 a.m. Futures are a limit down. Looks like it's gonna be a rough open. Just joking. April Fool's Day. Not a good one. Hope everyone's doing outstanding. Talk really quick about the market, some names I'm looking at, go from there. S&P is in the red though, reversing some of the gains overnight. I mean, markets were slightly higher overnight, have since given back the green, slightly in the red here. I don't know if we're going to get a turnaround Tuesday. I would call yesterday somewhat of a turnaround. So we had turnaround Monday. Maybe we get a little chop here today. I would love to see a green close. Back, I mean, 563 would be ideal. But I mean, you still have a lot of uncertainty, right? And I mean, that's the key word. And there'll continue to be uncertainty. But I think maybe we'll get some clarity to some of the uncertainty tomorrow at 3 o'clock. So POTUS is set to address the tariff, the elephant in the room. What are the tariffs? What does that look like? You had a Washington Post report this morning coming out pretty much regurgitating everything that's been out there already, and then citing economists who say that when the tariffs come out, it's going to stoke inflation to 7%. I mean, if that's the case, if that economists are right, you would think the market would somewhat price that in. I mean, S&P is down 4 or 5% this year. I mean, take it all with a grain of salt, right? 2022, the last time we had this rough a quarter, right? So the fall 2022, we'll have to. I'll say I always try to keep a little positivity, right? The half glass, glass half full kind of scenario. I always bring back try to find some historical comparisons to this current environment. And I'm not saying it's tit for tat exactly how it was in the summer of 2018 with the U.S.-China trade war, but there was similar headlines and people questioning how can they do this? China's our biggest trade partner. It's going to kill the economy. It's going to cause all this, all these things that never came to fruition, right? And not saying the same thing can't happen, but there's similar stoking the flames with the coal, and the firewood into the fire, right? They're stoking it. Maybe it is, right? I'm not saying not to discount everything completely, but to me, sometimes that it creates opportunity. So I continue to say I'm open to both sides of the fence. So I'm not going to sit here and say we can't have more downside or we can't just start to head towards a bear market and things can happen. But same token, I think we're going to chop around and maybe there'll be some tradable plays on both sides of the fence. And then maybe as we start to work through the Q1 earnings season, we can start to find some footing. That would be the ideal scenario. You take a look at the charts too, and been talking about that bear flag since last week. Need to see a move above that upper trend line. So I put this in here, and I like bull flags. I don't usually talk about bear flags because I'm an optimist, right? So, but can't discount this setup either. So typically with bull and bear flags, it's pretty much you have this large outsized move, and to us, obviously it was to the downside. Then you consolidate that move, and then the bears come back or the bulls come back in and push it down. Typically, the flag staff is what matters. You take half of the flag staff, and that's typically your target. We started 610, got down to 550. You do the math, 60 divided by 2, that's 30. 550 minus 30 is 520. So that would be at least a short-term target. I'm hoping that doesn't play out, but 540 to me is a key spot. I want to see that hold this week. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, it's going to be it's probably going to be like a Fed meeting volatility. So there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. I think there's room for a squeeze surprise, but certainly, I'll continue to keep things small. I put this on the watch list too, and I always say like small can become big quickly and big can become small. But right now, I'm trying to keep things small, but it's also tough to find small, inexpensive calls and puts, right? Netflix was the great example. The $100, the 1,000 calls, the stock's at 933, the 1,000 calls, so $70 out of money, 8% or so with 4.5 days left to expiration. They were $1 yesterday at the open. They went all the way down to 60 cents, kicked myself. I'll talk about that in a second. But tough to find risk reward because you can buy those contracts for $1 and the stock can stay flat for the rest of the week and all the premium's gone. So you need a move. So you're working against time. You're working against the implied move. You're working against all the other catalysts. So there's a lot working against you to make the money. So for me, I always say keep things small. When I feel more convicted in trades, I'll be a little more aggressive, whether it be call or put side, and go from there. But watching the support resistance. So today we'll see. I mean, I'd love to see 563. Can't rule out a pull either, but probably some chop and consolidation. And then I was talking about to watch this too. If we break 540 and the VIX goes over 30, I'll probably, that's when I'll don my bear suit, and I'll probably be less aggressive doing any long-term calls and getting more spec positions on the put side, and probably protection via calls. The SQQQs I was talking about, TZA calls, SRS, SKFs, maybe FAS puts, things like that. All right, so that's kind of the overall market. So then individual names, and yesterday morning, it's 9:30 with gap lower over 1% on the SPY, and then you're watching the market pull, and you think, well, this could be it. Maybe this is a capitulation move, or we have some follow through. Market went all the way down to 546, where the SPY did at 9:45, and then started to reverse. And once it broke 550, I said, oh, maybe we're going to get a bounce today. I went and got those shop calls. Shop was like 90, 91 when I got them, ran up to 95 by 2 o'clock. Locks them in for 100%, held the rest into today. We'll see how this plays out. Again, inexpensive strikes. So I'll probably just hold on to them even if we get a pull here, because I think there might be some more wild swings ahead this week. So thankfully, lock those in, ride those free. If we do get a bounce and the market finds at least a floor, I think it trades over 100 in the coming days, because I think it's been sold off unwarrantedly. A name that probably shouldn't be impacted by tariffs. But again, some folks out there the tariffs might impact all businesses, right? It might lower incomes, cause unemployment, cause consumer spending to go down. I guess then you start looking forward out, and maybe that'll impact some of these businesses. I just don't see it to happen to that extent. But all right, so that's Shopify. I don't know why I don't have Baidu here, but GameStop solidly green yesterday. I was actually looking at the May 40s. Today might be the day I add them. Whoop, do I have this up here? Yeah. All right. So the thing with GameStop is, you had that Wedbush analyst, Michael Pachter, coming out with his commentary around, he's had a $10 underperform rating, $10 price target underperform rating for like a year and a half now. Then he upgraded to 1150 underperform, and came out with comments after their earnings saying, wow, they're 4% on their cash hoard, $200 something million in interest income, and then talks about their declining business, blah, blah, blah. And then when they announce that they're going to be able to do their investment policy is going to allow them to do the treasury, their asset for Bitcoin, he says that it should trade 2.5 times their Bitcoin holdings, right? So he's pretty much doing the cash, right? But then if you use that same premise, and they just announced a $1.3 billion offering, so technically speaking, that should add like another $1.5 billion in their market cap, right? So if they just hold the cash and just keep doing offerings, by his rationale between the valuation of the company, if the company does an offering and it stays at that price or goes up, it should be valued 1.5 times more if they use that to buy Bitcoin, and if they keep doing that. So if you use his rationale, it should be bullish, right? So anyway, we'll see what happens. I think the fact that it's held up here, and then we'll get the next read on its short interest, I'm sure that's increased substantially. Then you start thinking you could have a lot more eyes on this one going forward. All right, so that's the GameStop brand. I'm not going to talk too much about that one. Added those Baidu strikes. The stock, unfortunately, after the reversal in the morning, just stayed flat. China markets were actually solidly green yesterday. Hopefully, find some footing here. Right at its 50-day moving average, 91.50. So if we can get over that and hold that today, I think that bodes well. Yeah, I'm on audio right now. Sorry, folks. Hang on one second. So that's Baidu, and then just some other names. So I was talking about Netflix. Again, if the poop really hits the fan and the economy goes into crapper, right? I mean, obviously it's going to hit all names, and Netflix is a discretionary name, right? Because you don't have to sit on your couch for 2 hours a day and binge watch a TV show, right? But that's what people do. Who knows how much cutback in spending for a consumer it would take for them to cut the cord on Netflix. But if they did, I mean, I think that's way down the line. And you take a look at a name that's sold off, especially after its earnings. I mean, it was all the way up near 1060 back in the middle of February, came all the way down with the pullback. Then it started to bounce back to 1,000. Then here again, it hit $900 pretty much on the dime yesterday, and then started to bounce. I have to think this trades up near 970 or so this week if the market finds footing. So may look for some strikes. Kicking myself. I mean, the mark was tumbling. It got down to 900 yesterday morning. I was looking at the 995s, the 1,000 strikes. It got down to 60 cents. Sure enough, it bounces. On the day, they're 100%. But I'll still look for an opportunity, because don't need it to go to 1,000, right? Just especially if you do it at the start of the week. If it gets to 960 by Wednesday, the thousands will be $3-4. So obviously, be ideal scenario if it does go over $1,000. You have $1,000 strikes, but that would be the best case scenario. Then other names. Oh, Roku was added to the Wells Fargo tactical list for Q2. I don't know if that's going to be the kick in knee. It's down four straight sessions since breaking under its 50-day moving average. I was looking at some strikes. I'll probably look, if I do get some strikes, it'll be into next week. If the market finds some footing, probably want to see it over 71. Disappointing too. The market's rallying and Roku's just staying flat around 71 bucks, doing its typical do nothing, just disappointing. So don't want to be in a spot where I'm staring at that one. But if it does finally look like it's getting some support, may finally get back into that one. And then Dell, so back down to 88 bucks, 89. That's where it hit back at the start of March. You look all the way back in August, I think it was 85. Those are kind of key levels. So I'll be watching for a reversal. Again, a lot has to do with the market, right? If we don't get a reversal, Dell's going to head back into the low 80s, and then there'll be another opportunity. So that's kind of that. If things get crazy during the midday, I'll be back on audio. Otherwise, let's have a great day. I'll be back rock and roll.